Yeah, hello and welcome to this video where I will be demonstrating a wire recorder. This particular wire recorder was manufactured by a Swedish company called Luxor, who manufactured mostly radios and televisions. But in 1947 they decided to start marketing a wire recorder for use for the general public. This is a machine not intended for professional use, but for use in the home. In order to record from a microphone or radio programs or records. Whatever you wanted to record, that's what this machine was for. And looking at the machine, this design is based on a combined wire recorder and record player design. So in the version, this particular machine is a wire recorder only, but it was available also as a combined wire recorder and record player, and in that case you would have a tone arm mounted here, coming here, and this would be your turntable. These brown studs here are actually made of rubber, and that's what the record would have rested on as it was playing. And the reason for combining a record player and wire recorder, I think, was mostly a question of economy. Having a separate wire recorder would have been prohibitively expensive, so in order to increase chances of people buying this thing, they combined it with a record player. Now, this particular version is without the tone arm. It's a wire recorder only version, and it's also, contrary to most of the machines I think that were sold back in the day, this is actually a freestanding machine. It's got a carrying handle here, and you can put a lid on and you can carry it with you. It does not have a built-in loudspeaker though. It's intended for connecting to a radio, so there are sockets on the back for connecting to the loudspeaker output of a radio and the record player input. So it had basically connected as a record player. And if you had a record player, you could plug it into these sockets here, and when you press gramophone here, it'll play a record or it'll play something from the associated record player. The machine is very basic in terms of functionality. You have this here, which would have been the turntable if it had been a record player, but as a wire recorder, it works as the take-up spool. Here's the supply spool. We'll demonstrate a reel in a moment. And here's the recording playback head, which is a combined record playback and erase head in one casing with a little slit for the wire. Now if we turn this machine on, there's a nice little pilot light that comes on here that can help you see the thin wire as you're threading it. And there's also a nice little handy little knob here that's spring-loaded, and when you lift it, you get a bit of space underneath, and you can actually tuck one of the wires in when you're working on it. The actual wires are on spools of this type, and if those of you who have seen wire recorders from Webster Chicago in the United States will recognize this reel as being the same type of reel as used on a Webster Chicago. In actual fact, this machine, the design of the spool and the wire speed, etc., is based on a license from the Armor Research Foundation in the USA. The spool, looking at the side, contains a starting band here, which is to ease the threading, followed by the actual wire. So here you can see the coil of wire that's on the spool, and here's the thin wire that's tied onto this starting band. So when you thread the machine, which is actually quite simple, you put the spool on here on the left, and then you wrap this starting band around the turntable here until you reach the wire, and then you have to verify that the wire actually goes through the slit in the record playback head. And after that, it's just a question of starting it in order to play. And this machine is completely push-button operated, which is quite interesting in view of the fact that push-button machines tend to be more complex because there's more mechanical linkages. But in a machine like this, a wire recorder, there's not very much you can do. The motor either drives the take-up reel or the supply reel when you're rewinding. There's no capstan because there'd be no practical way to have a capstan and a pinch roller with a thin steel thread. So the take-up reel doubles as the drive reel, and that of course means that the tape or the wire speed might not be as exact as you'd like. On the other hand, the wire speed is, as we'll see, quite high on a machine like this. It's about 2 feet per second, or 61 centimeters a second, which is quite high compared to a tape recorder. So the flywheel effect from this together with the speed means that any speed irregularities will be quite small. So we'll start this machine, and as I said, this particular version does not have a built-in loudspeaker or even an output stage, so it has to be connected to an external amplifier using cables connected to the back of it. If you'll notice, the recording playback head is mounted on a mechanism which causes it to move up and down as the wire plays. And the reason for that is to create an even wind of wire on the spool as it moves along. If you didn't have that, the wire would try to end up in one place, and you'd basically get a bit of a mess of the wire as it would slip back and forth on the small area on which it was spooling. That's called a Baylor mechanism, and it's very important that that works properly in order to avoid tangling the wire. One disadvantage with a wire recorder compared to a tape recorder is that the wire is quite unmanageable. It's extremely thin. I don't know if you can even see it as it passes through here. And it's made of steel, so it's not easy to work with. It's like a very, very, very thin thread with a bit of a will of its own. It's easy to join. You just tie a knot in it in order to join two parts, but if the wire does tangle, it creates a terrible mess which can take a long time to sort out, requiring lots of patience on the part of the operator. If we stop this machine here, we simply press the stop button and it just stops. No special brakes needed. If you want to rewind, there's another button for that. And the wheels basically just wind back. Because this wire speed is so high going forward, they've opted not to have the rewind speed too high because that would require a larger motor and also increase the risk of the wire tangling. As you can hear, you can actually hear the sound of the wire going through as it plays back, so there's a bit of a cueing effect. There's an auto stop mechanism which doesn't always trigger when this paper tape goes through a fork here. It's intended to stop the machine. That sometimes misses because it goes by so quite quickly. As you'll notice, for recording, there's no volume control or input level control or recording level meter. Some versions did have a recording level meter, but for some reason these freestanding versions that are not built into radiograms never had a recording level meter, and there's actually not even a volume control to set the volume. We have to remember, however, that these were the days before hi-fi. The wire recorder in this particular form was brought out by this company in 1947 and remained in production for something like 8 or 10 years maybe. And in those days, the fascination was to actually be able to record something. The fact that the recording level might have been a bit high or a bit low was not of too much consequence, and those who wanted to work on this, who wanted to make good fidelity recordings, would simply have to make a few test recordings to get the recording level right. So that's about all for this one. I thank you very much for watching, and see you some other time. Bye-bye.